Vanessa! Linda, please open the door. I'm your sister. You can't leave me outside in this storm. Stay outside till morning. We don't want you in this house. Please, Vanessa! Don't do this! Please, Vanessa! I'm begging you. You are my sister. Don't leave me out here. Vanessa, should we really leave her outside? She'll survive. Turn off the light.
Open the door. Please, it's raining. Vanessa, Linda, can you hear me? Ifeoma's fists were bleeding by the time she stopped banging. The rain was falling like stones from heaven, cold and merciless, soaking through her wrapper, running down her back like icy fingers. Thunder cracked across the sky and lit up the compound for one blinding second, and in that second, she saw a curtain move in the upstairs window. Someone was watching her. Someone was inside, warm and dry, listening to her scream and choosing not to open the door. Vanessa, please, it's Ifeoma. Let me in. The porch light flicked off. Ifeoma stood there in the darkness, water dripping from her lashes, her chest heaving, and for the first time in 5 years, something inside her cracked open. Not sadness this time, something else, something colder, something that felt like the beginning of the end. To understand how a woman ended up locked outside her own father's house in the middle of a storm, you have to go back 5 years to the day they buried Chief Okonko Adeyemi. Ifeoma was the last child, the last of 3 daughters, the one everybody called the small one, even when she was already a grown woman with calloused hands and tired eyes. Her sisters Vanessa and Linda were older, louder, and always dressed like they were going somewhere important, even to buy pepper at the market. On the day of the burial, while their father's body was still warm in the ground, Vanessa had pulled Ifeoma aside behind the canopy tents, her face arranged into something that looked like sorrow but wasn't. Ifeoma, you have to be strong, Vanessa said, gripping her hand a little too tightly. Daddy left nothing but debt. The bank, the contractors, the hospital bills, everything ate up whatever he had. We have to work together now, all 3 of us, to survive. Linda nodded beside her, sniffing into a handkerchief. It's true, Ifeoma. There's nothing left, nothing. Ifeoma believed them. Why wouldn't she? They were her sisters. Blood didn't lie. Or so she thought. So she went to work. She took a job in a textile shop in the morning and cleaned offices at night. She sent money home every month for food, for the generator fuel, for Linda's hair appointments that she didn't know were hair appointments, for Vanessa's business trips that were actually shopping sprees in Dubai. She never asked questions. She just walked and walked and walked, while her sisters lived like queens in the house their father had built with his own 2 hands. 5 years of her life disappeared like that. 5 years of buses at 5 a.m., of blistered feet, of skipping meals so her sisters could eat well. 5 years of believing a lie. And tonight, after a full day's walk in the rain, after missing the last bus and trekking 2 hours home, she had returned to find the gate locked from the inside and her own sisters refusing to let her in. You will bring trouble into this house, Vanessa had shouted through the window earlier before the porch light went off. Trouble, as if Ifeoma herself wasn't the one holding this family together with her bare hands. She sat down on the wet veranda step, pulled her knees to her chest, and closed her eyes as the storm raged around her. She didn't know it yet, but somewhere behind that house, in an old forgotten storage room, the wind was already bending an ancient mango tree past its breaking point, and by morning, nothing in that family would ever be the same again. To really understand Ifeoma's pain, you have to understand what silence does to a person when it's forced on them for years. Chief Okonko Adeyemi had built his house, a large duplex with white pillars and a mango tree older than all his daughters, with sweat, sacrifice, and stubborn discipline. He was a transport businessman who started with one rickety bus and ended up owning a fleet of them. He was strict, yes, sometimes too strict, but he loved his daughters fiercely, especially his last child, Ifeoma, who reminded him of himself. Quiet, hardworking, never asking for what she didn't earn. When cancer took him in 6 brutal months, it felt like the roof of the world had carved him. Ifeoma was 24. She remembered holding his hand in the hospital, listening to his labored breathing, promising him she would take care of her sisters, take care of the house, take care of everything. She didn't know that promise would become a cage. After the funeral, Vanessa took charge immediately of the finances, of the paperwork, of everything. She was the eldest after all, and she had a way of speaking that made you feel foolish for questioning her. Linda, the middle child, always followed whatever Vanessa said like a shadow with opinions. The lawyer said the will is complicated, Vanessa told Ifeoma one evening, waving a folder she never let anyone look inside. There are debts attached to the estate. If we are not careful, the bank will seize the house. Ifeoma, grieving and trusting, didn't ask to see the will herself. She trusted her sisters. She trusted blood. So the arrangement began. Ifeoma worked 2 jobs. Vanessa managed the finances. Linda helped with paperwork. Somehow, in this arrangement, Ifeoma's money always went into the house, and her sister's money from businesses Ifeoma didn't know existed, always stayed with them. She noticed things over time. The new car Vanessa bought on credit, the designer bags Linda carried to church every Sunday, the way both sisters spoke about her, not to her, but about her, like she was staff, not family. Ifeoma doesn't mind, she once overheard Vanessa say to a friend on the phone, laughing. She's used to it. She's the sacrificial one. The sacrificial one. The words had lodged themselves in Ifeoma's chest like a splinter that never worked its way out. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask why her sisters lived like royalty while she wore the same 3 work blouses on rotation for 2 years. But every time she opened her mouth, the guilt her father's death had planted in her, the promise to keep the family together, choked the words before they could leave her throat. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself things would get better. She told herself her sisters loved her, even when their actions screamed otherwise. But love doesn't lock you outside during a storm. That night, sitting on the cold veranda with rain soaking through her clothes, 5 years of swallowed anger finally rose to the surface. She thought about every sacrifice, every missed meal, every night she cried silently in her small room so her sisters wouldn't hear her being dramatic. And for the first time, a dangerous, quiet thought crossed her mind. What if they've been lying to me this whole time? She had no idea just how right she was or how close she was sitting to the truth, hidden inside an old metal box behind the very house that had shut her out. If this story is already gripping you, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next in that storm will leave you speechless.
The rain didn't stop. If anything, it grew angrier, as though the sky itself was furious on Ifeoma's behalf. Around midnight, her body shivering uncontrollably, she made a decision. She wasn't going to sit and freeze on the front veranda like a beggar at her own father's gate. There was an old storage building behind the house, the boys' quarters her father used to call it, though nobody had lived there in years. It still had a roof, it still had walls, it would have to do. She stood on shaking legs and walked around the compound, guided only by flashes of lightning, her sandals slipping in the mud. The wind howled through the mango tree like something alive, its branches thrashing violently above her head. She didn't look up. She didn't have the strength to be afraid of a tree when she was already this afraid of her own family. The storage room door creaked open with a push. Inside, it smelled of dust, old newspapers, and something faintly like her father's cologne, a smell that hit her so suddenly she had to steady herself against the door frame. This had been her private space once, a place he kept old files, old memories, things too sentimental to throw away and too painful to look at. Ifeoma sat on an old wooden crate in the darkness, hugging herself, listening to the storm scream outside. Somewhere in the house behind her, her sisters were probably warm under thick blankets, maybe even laughing, not thinking about her at all. "Why, Daddy?" she whispered into the dark, tears finally spilling freely now that no one was there to see them. The storm answered with a deafening crack of thunder that shook the very ground beneath her. Then came a sound like the sky itself splitting open, a groaning, tearing, catastrophic crash. The old mango tree, weakened by decades and pushed past its limit by the wind, snapped at its base and came crashing down directly onto the storage building's roof. Dust and debris exploded around her. Ifeoma screamed and threw herself sideways, rolling off the crate as a chunk of the roof caved in exactly where she had been sitting seconds before. Rain poured through the new hole in the ceiling, combining with dust to create a strange choking fog. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her ears rang. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely feel them. She had almost died. If she had stayed seated 1 second longer. She didn't want to finish that thought. Coughing, she crawled toward the far wall, away from the broken ceiling, and that's when her hand landed on something hard and metallic, buried beneath a pile of falling debris and old cartons. A box. An old rusted metal box, half buried in the rubble, with her father's initials, COA, engraved crudely on its lid. Her heart began to pound for a completely different reason now. She had never seen this box before in her life. With trembling fingers, soaked to the bone, sitting in the wreckage of a storm that nearly killed her, Ifeoma reached out and touched the lid of the box that was about to change everything. But it wouldn't open, not yet, not without a fight. The lid was rusted shut, sealed by years of dust and neglect. Ifeoma pulled at it with both hands, her fingers slipping against the wet metal, her breath coming out in short, desperate clouds in the cold night air. "Come on," she whispered, jaw clenched, tears and rainwater blending on her face. "Come on, open." She had no idea why this box mattered so much in that moment. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of her already sensed that whatever was inside was connected to everything her sisters had been hiding. Or maybe she just needed something, anything, to hold on to after a night like this. She found a broken piece of wood from the collapsed roof and wedged it under the lid, using it like a lever, pressing down with all the strength her exhausted body had left. The metal groaned in protest. She pushed harder, her palm slipping, a splinter driving into her thumb, but she didn't stop. With a final screeching creak, the lid popped open. Inside were documents, old yellowed papers, a stack of letters, and on top of everything, folded neatly, a single sheet of paper with a heading that made Ifeoma's entire body go still. Last Will and Testament of Chief Okonkwo Adeyemi. Her hands began to shake so violently she nearly dropped the paper into the mud. This wasn't the will Vanessa had shown the family lawyer 5 years ago. This was a different document, older in some ways, but dated just 3 months before her father's death, later than anything Vanessa had ever produced. Ifeoma unfolded it with delicate care of someone handling something sacred, angling it toward the thin moonlight now breaking through the storm clouds. Her eyes scanned the legal language, shaking, until they landed on a paragraph that stopped her heart completely. I, Chief Okonkwo Adeyemi, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my primary residence, along with 65% of all business assets, shares, and holdings, to my youngest daughter, Ifeoma Adeyemi, in recognition of her loyalty, her diligence, and her unwavering integrity. Ifeoma stopped breathing. She read it again and again. Her name, her father's handwriting in the margins, notes he added personally. The house she had just been locked out of in the pouring rain belonged to her. It had always belonged to her. For 5 years, she had scrubbed floors and skipped meals and cried herself to sleep in a house that was legally hers, while her sisters lived off money that was never fully theirs to spend. She sat there in the ruined storage room, thunder rumbling in the distance, rainwater dripping from the broken ceiling on the papers in her lap, and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, the sound of 5 years of pain finally making horrible, devastating sense. But there was more inside that box. Beneath the will, held together with a rusted paperclip, was a letter addressed simply to whoever finds this. Ifeoma's hands trembled as she reached for it, dreading and craving what it might say, because somewhere deep inside, she already knew this letter was going to break her heart all over again, just in a different way.
The letter was written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. The same slanted, careful script he used to sign report cards and scribble notes in his old Bible. Ifeoma held it close to catch what little moonlight filtered through the broken roof, her whole body trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from something deeper. My dearest Ifeoma, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong and I am no longer there to protect you myself. I am writing this 3 months before my surgery because my heart tells me I may not survive it, and I need you to know the truth before anyone has a chance to twist it. I discovered something painful this year. I found out that your sisters, Vanessa and Linda, had been meeting secretly with a property developer, discussing selling this house and dividing the money between themselves, long before I was even sick. They assumed I was too old and too busy to notice. They were wrong. I confronted them. They denied, of course, the way people deny things when they've already decided the truth doesn't matter. That was when I changed my will, quietly, with only my lawyer and my closest friend as witnesses. I left the house and the majority of my estate to you, my Ifeoma, because you are the only one who never asked me for anything except my presence. I am sorry I did not tell you while I was alive. I was afraid that if your sisters knew, they would find a way to fight it, to hurt you, to turn what should be a peaceful inheritance into a war. I hid this box myself, in the one place I knew they would never think to look, because your sisters never valued anything that wasn't shiny or new. If you are reading this letter now, it likely means life has already tested you. I am so sorry for whatever you have endured to get here. But know this, everything I built with you in mind, because you are the only one who ever helped me build it with an honest heart. Take what is yours, not out of revenge, but because it is right. And if your sisters ever show real remorse, real change, give them a chance. But never again let them make you feel small in a house that was always and will always be yours. I love you, my daughter. I am proud of you. I always have been. Your father, Okonkwo. Ifeoma pressed the letter to her chest and broke down completely, sobbing in a way she hadn't allowed herself since the day they buried him. The storm around her had begun to calm, the thunder retreating into distant rumbles, as if the sky itself had said everything it needed to say. She sat there for a long time, holding her father's words like a lifeline, understanding finally that she had never been abandoned. She had been protected, even after death, by a man who saw her worth when no one else in that house did. But protection was one thing, justice was another. And as the first grey light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Ifeoma wiped her tears, gathered the will, the letter, and every document in that box, and stood up on legs that no longer felt weak. She was walking back into that house, and this time, her sisters were the ones who wouldn't see it coming. The storm had passed by the time Ifeoma walked around to the front of the house, but the compound looked like a battlefield. Broken branches everywhere, muddy water pooling across the lawn, the gate hanging slightly off one hinge from the wind. She barely noticed any of it. Her eyes were fixed on the front door, the same door that had been slammed shut against her less than 12 hours earlier. She knocked, firm, steady,
Not the desperate pleading bang of a woman begging to be let in, but the calm, deliberate knock of someone who already knew she didn't need permission to enter her own home. It was Linda who opened the door, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of Ifeoma, soaked, muddy, exhausted, but standing tall, clutching a rusted metal box against her chest like a shield. "Ifeoma, where have you been? We were worried." "Save it," Ifeoma said quietly, and something in her voice made Linda step back instinctively. Vanessa appeared behind her sister, arms crossed, already composing her face into the practiced expression of righteous innocence she always wore when caught doing something wrong. "Ifeoma, you can't just disappear all night and then come back here acting." "I locked outside," Ifeoma said, cutting through her sister's words like a blade. "In a storm, your own sister, and you are going to stand there and pretend to be worried about me?" Silence fell over the room. Ifeoma walked further inside, dripping muddy water on the marble floor her sisters had always fussed over, and set the metal box down on the dining table with a heavy, deliberate thud. "Do you know what happened last night while you two were warm and dry, laughing behind that door?" Ifeoma's voice was shaking now, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of 5 years finally breaking free. "A tree fell on the old storage room. It nearly killed me. And underneath the rubble, I found this." She opened the box and pulled out the will, laying it flat on the table between them. Vanessa's face changed the instant she saw the document. All the color drained from it, replaced with something between panic and disbelief. That's not... Where did you get that?" Vanessa stammered, reaching for it, but Ifeoma pulled it back just out of her grasp. "It's Daddy's real will, the one you never showed me, the one that says this house, this entire house, and most of everything he owned belongs to me. Not to you, not to Linda, me." Linda sank slowly into a chair, her hands covering her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. Although whether they were tears of guilt or tears of loss, Ifeoma couldn't yet tell. "You told me there was nothing left but debt," Ifeoma continued, her voice rising now, 5 years of swallowed rage finally giving permission to speak. "You made me work myself sick for 5 years, sending you money every month, while you two lived off an inheritance that was never fully yours to spend. And when I came home last night, exhausted, soaked, needing shelter, you locked me outside because you were afraid I would bring trouble into a house that was legally mine." "Ifeoma, please, let us explain," Vanessa started, her voice cracking. "There's more," Ifeoma said, ignoring her completely, pulling out the folded letter from the box. "Daddy knew. He knew you two were trying to sell this house behind his back before he even got sick. That's why he changed the will. He protected me from you, even after he was gone." The room fell into silence, so heavy it felt like it might crush them all. Vanessa opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again because for the first time in her life, she had absolutely nothing to say.
For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound in the room was the distant dripping of rainwater from the damaged roof outside, and Linda's quiet, broken sobs. "You have to understand," Vanessa finally said, her composure cracking at the edges. "We were scared. After Daddy died, the business was struggling. We thought if we managed things ourselves, quietly, we could protect the family without burdening you." "Protect the family?" Ifeoma's laugh was sharp, humorless, disbelieving. "You bought a new car every 2 years, Vanessa. Linda has a wardrobe full of designer bags. Meanwhile, I was wearing the same shoes for 3 years straight, working 2 jobs, sending you money for debts that never existed. Don't you dare tell me you are protecting anybody but yourselves." Linda lifted her tear-streaked face. "Ifeoma, we're sorry. We really are. We were wrong. Please, don't take the house. Where will we even go?" There it was. Not an apology rooted in remorse for what they'd done to Ifeoma, but fear of what they now stood to lose. Ifeoma studied her sisters' faces carefully, really looked at them, maybe for the first time in years, and saw the truth plainly written there. They weren't sorry for hurting her. They were sorry they'd been caught.
She thought of her father's letter. If your sisters ever show real remorse, real change, give them a chance. So, Ifeoma took a slow breath and made a decision that surprised even herself. "I'm not going to throw you out today," she said, and both sisters looked up at her with something like hope. "I have every legal right to. This house is mine. Every document, every signature, everything in this box proves it, and I could call a lawyer this morning and have you both packed and gone by tomorrow." She paused, letting the weight of that truth settle over them. "But I'm not going to do that, not yet, because despite everything, you are still my sisters, and Daddy asked me to give you a chance if you ever showed real remorse, real change. So here it is, your one chance. Not words, not tears, change. I want to see you both take responsibility, work honestly, contribute to this house like family instead of leeching off it in secret. If you can do that, we rebuild together." Vanessa wiped her face, nodding quickly, almost too quickly. Yes, of course, Ifeoma. But Ifeoma's voice hardened again. "The lies stop today. No more secret meetings with developers. No more hiding money. No more treating me like the family maid while you two play princess with my sweat. The moment I catch even one more lie, this arrangement is over permanently. Do you understand me?" Linda nodded immediately, genuinely shaken. But Vanessa's eyes, just for a flicker of a second, didn't show gratitude. They showed calculation. The same look she'd worn 5 years ago when she'd first lied to Ifeoma about her father's death. Ifeoma saw it, and something inside her, some final, lingering hope that her elder sister could truly change, quietly died in that moment. She said nothing about it then. She simply picked up the box, walked to her father's old study, now legally hers, and closed the door behind her, leaving her sisters standing in the wreckage of their own making, uncertain of what the future now held. She had given them a chance. What they did with it next would decide everything. 3 months passed. At first, things seemed to improve. Linda got a real job at a boutique in town and for once contributed honestly to the household. She apologized properly to Ifeoma one quiet evening, without excuses, without tears meant to manipulate, just a simple, sincere, "I'm sorry for what I let happen to you." Ifeoma believed her, and slowly, cautiously, something like sisterhood began to rebuild between them. Vanessa was different. Ifeoma noticed it in small things at first. A phone call quickly ended when she walked into the room, a folder of documents Vanessa tried to hide in her handbag, a strange car that parked outside the gate twice in a week and then drove off when Ifeoma stepped outside. She said nothing, only watched, the way her father had once quietly watched and gathered proof before acting. Then, one afternoon, she found it. An email, accidentally left open on the family computer, between Vanessa and the same property developer her father had warned about in his letter. Vanessa was negotiating again, trying to convince the developer that ownership issues could be resolved if he was willing to wait and be patient, promising she would find a way to gain control of the property eventually. She read every word twice, her hands steady this time, her heart no longer breaking because she had already suspected this. She had simply been waiting for confirmation. That evening, she called Vanessa into the study. "I gave you a chance," Ifeoma said calmly, sliding a printed copy of the email across the table. "I told you the lies had to stop. And here you are, still trying to sell what isn't yours, still trying to manipulate strangers into helping you steal from your own sister." Vanessa's face went through several emotions: shock, denial, and finally exhausted defeat. "Ifeoma, it's not what—" "Ifeoma, please don't," she said, holding up a hand, her voice quiet but final. I'm done being lied to in my own father's house." She didn't shout, she didn't cry. She simply stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I'll help you financially if you need it, not because you deserve it, but because Daddy raised me to be better than the way you two treated me. But you will not live under this roof anymore, Vanessa. Not after everything." Vanessa left without another word, too proud to beg, too guilty to argue further. Linda, given the choice to stay in her own small apartment nearby with Ifeoma's support, chose to remain close, genuinely trying, genuinely grateful, genuinely changed. A year later, the house that had once been a place of secrets and quiet suffering had transformed into something warm again, repainted, the storage room rebuilt, a new mango tree planted where the old one had fallen, small and fragile, but growing steadily towards the sky. Ifeoma sat on the veranda one evening, the same veranda where she had once sat shivering and locked out in the rain, and watched the sunset paint the compound gold. She thought of her father often, his letter, his quiet protection, his belief in her even from beyond the grave. She had lost his sister that year, but she had found herself. And for the first time in 5 long years, sitting in the house that had always, truly belonged to her, Ifeoma finally felt something she hadn't felt since her father was alive: peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth always comes to light, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for watching till the end.